Where did I live in my past life? Well, what do you think? Is it time to go to the hypnotherapist? Perhaps, but you can find clues in your present life as far as where you lived in your past life. So that's what we're going to do today. And let's go. It's Carol Ann Chapman. This is the second episode in my series on how to find your past lives without going to a hypnotherapist. Now, today I am going to ask you to look at things in your life. And the first thing I want to ask you is there somewhere in this life that you just needed to be, that you just had to go? Is there someone you still want to go, somewhere you still really, really want to go? This is a like top notch destination that's vitally important to you. I want you to take note of it. Like I said, this is the second episode, and I'm going to have a number of more episodes, and we're going to get more clues as to what your past life or what your past lives could be. Today, we're talking about where did you live in your past life. Now, I want you to think of where did you really, really want to be, or where do you really absolutely not want to be. We're not talking about the lukewarm middle places that, like, my family's going to Costa Rica. I'll go along with them. I looked it up online. There's supposed to be some cool monkeys there. It should be fun. That's lukewarm. When you absolutely have to be somewhere is like, I need to go to Japan. I have got to go to Japan, and I have got to see the tea there, the terraces. I want to see how they grow that tea in Japan. Okay, that's hot. That's something you really, really want to do, or a place you really, really want to be. Or you could, it could be a place you really, really don't want to be. Like, I can't stand the thought of going to Germany. I don't know why. I just hate the idea of going to Germany. Okay, so I want you to look at the best and the worst with this. Now, do you have a place that's come up in your mind? Okay, hold on to it, write it down, because the reason why I'm asking you for either the best or the worst is because part of how we remember past lives is by karma. And karma has to do with unfinished business from a past life. So, therefore, you might have a very strong negative feeling of a place, which means that you were there in that past life. For example, how I have memories of having been in Germany and in the concentration camps. So it's understandable. I don't have any desire to be in Germany in this life whatsoever. No. All right. Now, maybe you don't have something that's come to mind. Then I'm going to make a number of suggestions. This is based on skyscanner.com, which is a place where they book flights to go to places. And they made a list of the 9 most popular destinations where people like to travel. And I mean, you can have a feeling for a past life by something you love and want to return to. So this list might help you to remember that kind of past life, good or bad. And I'm going to add a 10th one. Their list is of 9. I'm going to add a 10th destination because it's not on their list. And a girlfriend of mine really, really, really her whole life wanted to go to Australia. Okay. So note, have you wanted very much to go to Australia or not? One or the other, not lukewarm. Now, the 9th on the Skyscanner list is Iceland. You know, Iceland is the place with glaciers and hot springs and also volcanoes. It's a very amazing, dynamic kind of country. And it's also part of Scandinavia. It's, I think, part of Denmark, but anyway, that's the Scandinavian countries. So that is ninth on the Skyscanner list. And I believe 1.2 million people like to visit there every year. Now, number 8 on their list is Machu Picchu in Peru, which is a ruin high up in the mountains in Peru. And there's archaeological exploration going on there. Why did these people want to live way up in the mountains like that? But Machu Picchu is also symbolic of a love of the west coast of South America and other types of ruins in South America. Say the Nazca lines are in South America. Now, number 7, which has visitors at the rate of 1.5 million a year, is Stonehenge in England. You know, those are those huge monolithic stones with the capstones on top of them, holding the stones almost as if they're holding them together on top. How did anyone ever get those stones up there? In any case, this is a destination of many people who find Stonehenge very exciting. And there's also next, number 6 on the line is Christ the Redeemer in Brazil. That is that amazing statue on the top of this huge bluff overlooking Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. The Christ there sort of blessing the country down below. It is breathtaking to see it in pictures. Is this a place you long to go? Then there's the great, oh, I missed some. That was number 6. Number 5, the Acropolis in Athens, Greece. The Acropolis, there's a number of ruins there, and probably the most beautiful is the Parthenon. It's that building with all the columns. Next is number 4, the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France. And 7 million people visit the Eiffel Tower every year. Number 3 is the Great Wall of China. 10 million people go to the Great Wall of China. And you could just take this as sort of Asia or that part of Asia. I mean, for you, it might be Thailand, it might be Cambodia, Angkor Wat. There's definitely ruins, there's mythology. There's something totally intriguing for you, the need and desire to pursue more about China. And number 2 on the list, 14.7 million people visited there. I think this list was made in 2019. This is to the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. In the middle of a desert, people flock to the Great Pyramids. And do you know what number 1 on their list is? I was totally shocked. Because if you watched my video on Harriet Tubman's dreams, she brought the slaves to safety to Canada. And I didn't realize I grew up in a town just very near to where Harriet Tubman lived for 10 years. In fact, it's where I went to university. And the other thing that's really close to the town where I grew up in Canada is Niagara Falls, number 1 on this list. 30 million people visit every year. Excuse me. Guess it chokes me up a bit. But, you know, growing up there, if I had known that Niagara Falls was going to be this amazing famous place that people have to go to. I mean, why did I leave? Anyway, our family used to go there for picnics, and we knew there were a lot of tourists there. And so in the summer, when we couldn't get parking close to the falls, then we would go and have our picnics, like at the floral display or at the Brock Monument, at various other attractions in that area. And it's the kind of place that when I was a teenager and dating, guys who had cars would take us to Niagara Falls because there were restaurants, nice fancy restaurants there. And actually, I had one of my first jobs in Niagara Falls, the Seagram's Tower. Excuse me. It's now called the Conica Minolta Tower. It had a hot dog stand at the base of that tower, and there was ice cream served there as well. And I was one of the kids scooping out the ice cream out of those bins and making the hot dogs for the tourists. It was one of my first summer jobs there. Anyway, 30 million people, Niagara Falls. Okay, so there's my list of these really 10 places. And did any of it ring a bell with you? Note it, because next I'm going to give you my ideas of what you could have been in a past life if you chose that place. All right, so let's start with Australia. You know, Australia was peopled by prisoners. They were transported from England. And so Australia it did have an indigenous population, the Aboriginal people. And so in a past life, you might have been an Aboriginal person in Australia, or you might have been one of these transported criminals from England. Now, don't worry about having been a criminal. Some people were transported for stealing a loaf of bread because they were starving. So this was an enterprising group that went to Australia. And it might, if this was your must to go to place, it might be that kind of past life for you. Now, number 9, Iceland, the glaciers, the hot springs, the volcanoes, Scandinavia. If you chose Iceland, could you have been a Viking? Because the Vikings went to Iceland. And there's all this lore about the Vikings being these raping and plundering people, but recent research has shown that many of them brought their wives and families with them, and many of them were younger sons who did not stand to inherit the land. Their older brothers would inherit the land, so these younger sons had to go further afield to find land for themselves. So you might have been a Viking man or woman if you have this strong desire to be in Iceland. Now, Machu Picchu, Peru. You know, that area of the world has a lot of a shamanic tradition. Is there a chance that in your past life you were a shaman or an apprentice or somebody involved with the spiritual tradition in South America? You could have also been a weaver of alpaca wood or just an ordinary person making a living off the land in that area. Interestingly, the Nazca lines that I mentioned earlier, some people think that aliens made them. Maybe you're an alien, who knows? All right, Stonehenge in England. Well, you know, I was at Stonehenge. It's one of the places I have to be. I had to be, and I loved it. And I was also in Avery. And as far as past lives go, think of the very rich spiritual heritage in the United Kingdom. Think of the Druids, think of the fairies, think of, uh, uh, the Knights of the Round Table, Sir Lancelot, all of that comes from England. And you might have a, a past life having to do with these type of spiritual traditions. You might have also been a king or a queen, lived in a castle, worn a chastity belt. Who knows? There's an awful lot that was going on years ago. All right, moving on from Stonehenge, Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro. So, if this is a place that really resonates with you, either plus or minus, could you in a past life had been a very devout Christian? Could you have been perhaps a native person working, fishing in the Amazon, um, having a life in the forest there? These are all possibilities if you feel drawn to being in Brazil. Then there's the Acropolis in Athens, Greece. Now, the Acropolis, I have a girlfriend who had to go there. And for her, it was a Christian religious experience because I didn't realize so much of Christianity started in Greece. Plus, there's an awful lot of our philosophies, and many philosophers were in Greece. This is a long-standing tradition coming out of this part of the world, Turkey and Greece. So consider, does that, if this is somewhere that you have to be, that you have strong feelings for, does it sort of resonate with you that you could have been a philosopher or could have been involved in the early Christian church? Now, next comes the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France. 7 million people go there every year. Well, my first thought about France and Paris is, of course, the guillotine, because France was the place where the world changed. There was a revolution there, and that revolution spread to America, to England, their parliamentary system, throughout the world. And you might have been an aristocrat who got their head cut off. You might have been a peasant who was finally going to get some power. Um, France also has all kinds of, uh, I've been to France and I love it there. They also have all kinds of castles and tapestries. They have such a rich history. So if you feel drawn to the Eiffel Tower, to Paris, to France, Mont Saint Michel is a fantastic place to visit too. You might have been there in a past life. Now, what about the Great Wall of China? Oh, there's so much to do with China, from tea growing to, well, if you're a woman and you have trouble with your feet, say you don't want to go to China, it could be because you had been a rich woman in China and had your feet bound. And so you have very mixed feelings. You might love Chinese. Some of their clothes are really beautiful. Their decorations, their homes, their traditions. They have an amazing warriors in the past. It's just amazing things in the Asian countries as well. So if this was a important place for you, try to think if something in that area, in that country, really appeals to you, there's a chance that you were involved with whatever that is in your past life. Now, number 2 on the list is the Great Pyramids. You just think of Egypt, just think of the pharaohs, think of all that jewelry, think of Oh, the splendor of that time. And it could be that you were involved with that if you are drawn to the Great Pyramids and to Egypt, that in your past life you were there. Now, maybe if you hate the thought of going to Egypt, you might have been a Jewish slave who escaped across the Red Sea. Who knows? But again, look at if you really, really want to be there, you might have had a very, very good experience there. Or if you absolutely don't want to be there, it might have been an unpleasant experience. Now, finally, is Niagara Falls, number one. And, you know, as I said earlier, this is right close to where I grew up. Now, if you have a desire to go to Niagara Falls, it could be that in a past life, you actually got married in Niagara Falls. I know my husband's grandparents had their honeymoon in Niagara Falls. So I think there are people who are alive in the Civil War. And that might be a past life you had where you went on your honeymoon to Niagara Falls. The other thing about Niagara Falls, having grown up there, we learned in school there is a mythology among the native people. They're called First Nations people in Canada, Native Americans in the United States. And their tradition is that there was um, that the people had to make a sacrifice over Niagara Falls of a young maiden, and the chief's daughter in this one story made the sacrifice. I think they had to appease the god of the falls. I don't remember the whole story. The only thing I remember as a kid when I heard that story is, oh my God, she's going to go over the falls and die. It was just terrible. So it could be if you find Niagara Falls a destination, it could be that you have past life memories of having been a First Nations Native American person. And I have these wonderful images here from the time of the fur traders that I bought these here. Well, I don't have them here right now, but these are I'm going to have to, anyway, I will make this into a video and put the images in. They are by Frances Ann Hopkins. She was an artist in the 1860s, around that time. She was from Britain and she came with her husband, who was part of the Hudson's Bay Company, which did a lot of fur trading with the native people. And she went with her husband in these birch bark canoes to the various outposts where they were trading with First Nations people. And she was an artist. She came from a family of artists, and she made these amazing paintings in these huge canoes. And so um, one of these paintings, the interesting thing is she is almost always putting herself in the canoe because she went with her husband on these trips. And you'll see her like in one picture, there's a small waterfall and this huge canoe is going by. And in the middle of the canoe, there is her with a hat with ribbons down her head, and her husband, I think he's wearing a hat too. And then the native people in front and back rowing or paddling. And another magnificent painting of hers is in a number of these canoes going through a fog in a very calm, very shallow water. And you just see the back of her in that canoe with the ribbons hanging down from her hat. And, just in case you think, oh, everything was just um, on these calm waters. Well, take a look. This is running the rapids, where the canoe is just leaping over the rapids. And if you look closely in this picture between the Indians, there she is with her husband and that canoe. I mean, in those days, there were no indoor toilets. She would have had a chamber pot at home, and they would have had I think they called it a Jericho, a privy out in the yard. Servants emptied the chamber pots. It was a way different life. I often think that the way we live today, we live way, way better than the kings and queens of ancient times in their castles. We are so lucky in our warm, air conditioned homes with our indoor toilets. Anyway, that was just a slight rabbit hole off to the side there. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed looking at where you could have lived in a past life. And I'm interested to know if you, what you came up with. So, leave something, a comment down below, or question or whatever. Now, I'm going to continue with this series on how to know your past lives with a hypnotherapist next week. So that'll be Tuesday, April 18th, and at 8 p.m. again. And I'm going to continue with this series on where did I live in a past life. And we're going to get even a little more specific into the details. And I'm doing another live stream or premiere. We'll see what I can manage, if I have technical difficulties or not, but it'll be this Thursday, April 13th. And I'm continuing a series there having to do with memories of Atlantis and finding them in ruins throughout the world. So I hope you'll join me for those. Hope you'll join me for those. And it's been nice talking to you about this stuff. It's very exciting for me to be able to share it with you. So, hope to see you again. Toodaloo. Bye bye.